Hello and welcome to our 11th episode of the Roofless Dog and Pony Show. Hey, I'm pronouncing it right. Finally, after 11 weeks. My name is Julio and I'm the Dream Alchemist at Roofless Painters. And I'm going to be the host of this episode. The Roofless Dog and Pony Show is a live, unedited presentation featuring the conceptual and stylistic inspiration behind our painting webinars. We introduce the theme of the next painting collection and talk about the inspiration behind it, mentioning contemporary or modern art notes, art history references, and we add a bit of commentary. You can find all the episodes on our Instagram page and also in our YouTube channel. We are going to go ahead and introduce the assignment, the premise, and we'll tell you what we're going to do tomorrow, Friday. If you have any questions, let us know. And if you'd like to contribute to the presentation, just send us your notes. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start sharing the first slide and talk about there you go. So we titled the webinar Late Summer Sadness. This is going to be our 35th painting series of 2020. That means that we've been painting 35 different subjects so far, and it's going to be our 25th collection or series since we started the lockdown, the sequestration, the house arrest. That's a little bit too dramatic, but 25 weeks that we have been painting remotely. So late summer sadness. Why and how? So as you know, we're headed rapidly towards fall, and on these last few days of summer, we enjoyed reading an article on artnet.com about a painting by Berthe Morisot, titled Summer Day, and that's going to be the inspiration for the series. And this is the painting that the article is based on. And it's a beautiful, it's a wonderful article written by, because we have to say that, Katie White. So she goes about mentioning three things that are quite unknown about this painting. So I'm going to go about those things. But first, I just wanted to say that probably it's going to be... we're assuming that you've never heard this name of this painter, Berthe Morisot. And there's a reason why, even though she was one of the most important Impressionist painters of the time, history completely erased her from the books. And you can bet gender had something to do with it. Anyhow, there's been a resurgence of interest for her work, and I'm glad, and we're glad, and this article is an example of that. But we wanted to take the article, the painting, the end of summer, and have an opportunity to do a portrait assignment, and also an opportunity to talk about her life and why she was so incredible and amazing and important. The three things in the painting that the article goes about, it's the use of a special or a particular blue, cerulean blue. This pigment cerulean blue wasn't introduced commercially until the late 1860s, and by then she wasn't alive anymore. So it's interesting how she acquired the color and used the color, because it was very it wasn't commercially available. Another thing that's important to say, and that goes back to the difficulties and challenges that she had in her life, is that women were not they were not forbidden, but you wouldn't see women painting plein air or painting outdoors at all. She was an upper middle class or upper class, I should say, person. She was born in Paris in the late 1800s, and her parents were very supportive and they were very well off. But for a woman of her social status, or any woman, to be painting outside, it wasn't considered the right thing. So this is very interesting because we assume that at the time everyone was outside in Montmartre and painting buildings and streets and bars and clubs. Well, women were not allowed to be to be in clubs unless they were sex workers. So it was very hard for them to paint outside. They were constantly harassed. A woman of her social status, it was even worse because it represented, or it meant that she wasn't seen as part of the class. So her options, or women's options, were extremely limited in regards of subject matter. And this painting, the article doesn't mention this, but we sort of like did a little bit of research of her life, and in this painting, it's in a park in Paris, and the painter, or the point of view, it's from inside the boat. There are two female figures. The art historians believe that she paid these two young women to be her models. But there is something really interesting about this, because it's not the first time that she painted from inside a boat. And the reason is because when she tried to paint in an urban setting, she was immediately harassed by people, by children mostly. They would throw things at her. So sometimes she just had to rent a boat, if it was in a park or by a harbor, because she wanted to have peace and quiet and not be bothered when she would paint. Forget about the women being able to paint in Paris outside. That wasn't impossible. And it's amazing because the few women that painted at the time, some art critics say that their subject matter was very motherly and very feminine. It wasn't because of their choice of subject matter. They could not paint certain things because they were not allowed to. So the only option that they had is to paint domestic scenes, because indoors, because talking about house arrest, what was allowed at the time for them was pretty much comparable to house arrest. They were not able to sell anything. So even though she wanted to make some money from her paintings, she wasn't able to sell directly. It was not considered proper for a woman to sell anything at the time. So she had to find connections and friends who would put her work in front of the eyes of potential buyers. She wasn't commercially successful, although she was very, very respected, and she was part of the major, or the most important group of Impressionist painters at the time. So she also said in one of her diaries that she didn't like to paint the view from a window, and because of a couple of reasons. Number one, she said it wasn't the same. She didn't have the same experience of being part of the environment. And number two, she believed that, and we kind of agree with that, she believed that painting from a point of view that's higher than standing up created very weird compositions. She was very interested in arranging things on the canvases in a very specific way, but she did not like higher points of view. So she refused to paint from second floors or anywhere that was above the ground, I guess. But she, of course, she also hated painting from boats because the boats constantly moved. She was exposed to wind especially on an open air. The wind is a little bit stronger than being protected by buildings. So she wasn't happy at all. So this is in that sense, this is an extraordinary painting, an example of all the things that we just said. The article doesn't go as deep as we are trying to explain, but yeah, we love that painting for many reasons. And what else we wanted to say about her life that's also interesting? Although she painted close to 870 paintings in her life, throughout her life, when she passed away, in her death certificate, when it said profession, they left it blank. They did not say painter. So that's really telling also. And also we wanted to just bring it up because it just says or explains the many challenges that she had as a painter. She was passionate about painting. Another of the challenges that she had at the time is the fact that the most prestigious art school in Paris did not allow women to study. It was simply not allowed. It was forbidden. She died very young of pneumonia. She was 54, and the school, the most prestigious school at the time, allowed female students 2 years after her passing. So if you were a woman and you loved painting, so you just couldn't go to art school. So the only option that she had was to hire teachers and tutors. And because of her social status and the fact that her family supported that, she was lucky enough to have painters come to her house and teach not only her, but she had she had two sisters. So the three sisters were privileged enough to get painting lessons. She also got instruction and lessons going to the Louvre and copying the masters. So she was at some point a copyist. And I just remember the series that we did not a long time ago about that activity. So yeah, the challenges that she had keep piling on. And for example, it was it was a given that if you were a male painter at the time, you could hang out with your buddies and paint together. There was a very strong sense of community at the time. Some of the artists that were important or recognized, they in fact wanted to create their own painting communities in the north of France. I think Gauguin, we talked about how he wanted to, or he did in fact create a painting community in Normandy, I believe. Van Gogh, when he moved to the south of France, his intention was to paint or to create an artist community. And there are other examples for a female artist. And we know here at Ruthless Painters, we know how important that is in the sense of encouraging and nurturing the practice. But for a female artist, that wasn't possible. It wasn't the case. Forget about painting with other guys. That would have been equated to prostitution. Everything was equated to prostitution at the time for some reason. Selling something, going to a club or a bar, and painting with guys, and probably going to art school. So another example of limitations in subject matter were the fact that female painters were not allowed to have nude models at the time. So you will see dozens of paintings of naked ladies by the Impressionists. But the female artists, the female Impressionists, they simply, it's not that they wanted to paint babies all the time. They did, but they also had very limited options. They wish they could have painted other subject matters. These were not just like dumb individuals that were just happy and content with painting babies. No, their diaries and their letters talk about the deep sense of inequality and unfairness that they felt. Now, there's a quote in one of the letters, or there's a sentence that explains that pretty straightforwardly. She says, "I do not think any man would ever treat a woman as his equal, and it is all I ask because I know my worth." So it's a very interesting quote. She's not begging for equality. She is just making a statement saying that this will never happen. And the only thing she asks, she's not asking for a chance because she knows her worth. She's just basically asks a chance to be treated as equal. So it's a very good quote to explain the reason why the subject matter chosen by female painters at the time wasn't their choice. It was the only choice. What else I wanted to bring up, because I think it's just going to be very interesting to we felt very inspired to let me just bring like some of the extraordinary images that she painted. By the way, many art critics and art historians consider her and her work, I should say, the most impressionist of the impressionists. So that just tells you how radical her style of painting was, in the sense that she did take down all the rules and went further than anyone else. She was accepted. I think there were 8 salons, painting salons at the time. She was accepted to 7 of them. In fact, I think the first salon that she submitted, Monet was rejected and she was accepted. So her work was considered much superior than some of her coexisting, contemporary partners. I'm just going to bring you some of the most extraordinary, what I feel the most incredible images. This is a self-portrait that she presented to one of the salons. By the way, this presentation is going to go on for probably, I don't know, an hour. But we're very excited about just explaining all these things that were buried after she passed away. So this was a salon about self-portraits, and a lot of the masters of the time, they just put their own portraits. For example, Van Gogh's self-portrait was one of his self-portraits was also included in the salon. So this is not an unfinished painting. She knew this work was going to be not only seen by people, but she knew that this was one of the most important exhibitions of the time, or at the time. So she decided to present herself through her portrait in this manner. Just look at the way she leaves the background underdeveloped, I should say completely unfinished, and the incredible, radical, ethereal, vibrant brushstrokes that she uses for the area around her figure. Not to mention the way she painted the folds of the fabric. And there's no blending here. It's all whipped up brushstrokes. This is also an extraordinary, I'm going to use this word a lot because it's incredible. And what I'm really excited about is that I feel so lucky that I have been able to witness and see this painting live. Some contemporary curators, they say that her work doesn't photograph well, even with color. Because of her brushstroke and the way she painted, there's never going to be a similar experience when you see a photograph and then when you see the real painting. That's a given. But specifically with her work, apparently this is there's a much bigger chasm between both experiences. This painting, believe it or not, it's in the U.S. and believe it or not, is in Florida and St. Pete's Museum, St. Petersburg Museum in Florida. And it's amazing because it's not a big museum, but I was there for a wedding. It was 2 years ago, and the wedding was in the museum, and we had the museum to ourselves. So the museum was open for the guests, and I had the collection to myself. And this extraordinary painting again, its title "Reading," was or is in St. Petersburg, Florida, and you need to put that location in your bucket list, because you've got to see not only St. Petersburg. There's a Dali museum there, the only Dali museum outside of Spain. Not only for that, but also for this collection of paintings. This painting is in St. Pete's Museum, and I cannot zoom in, but again, the way the disintegration of the brushstroke on her blouse, it makes it look almost like a ghost. It's so masterfully painted, so filled with convincing, I would say, intention. She was riddled with doubt when she painted. She always thought that she wasn't good enough. But what's new? We all kind of like feel like that. But her brushstrokes, they were so strong, I guess, not strong, but intentional and powerful and courageous. And that's a good example of that. She loved painting with white. And let me see if I have some examples of her use of white. I don't think. Oh, well, this is not an example of her use of white, but it's an example of a landscape that she did in Paris. This is the Seine River, and she painted from the riverbank. And you can see some people looking at her from the balcony, but then she's on the other side of the river. So she, my guess is that she chose a space or an area along the river in Paris. She lived in Paris all her life. That was sort of like private. And my guess also is that this painting doesn't have a lot of work, just because I think she probably did it very fast, because who knows who approached her and started like messing with her. But she had a daughter. Her daughter's name was Julie. Berthe married the brother of Monet, right? Yeah, Eugene Monet. So Monet was her brother-in-law, and this is Julie Monet. And because of her lack of models, she painted her daughter many times. This is a painting of her daughter, and I don't know if you see it, but there's a tablecloth that's white. There's a lot of white curtains. She has a lot of white in her palette. So Julie, her daughter, comes up in a lot of her paintings. This is another example, and she, at some point earlier in her career, she was influenced by Edward Munch, and this is possibly the best example I found of that Edward Munch influence. She sort of went her own way, but at the very beginning, when she was learning or when she was getting inspired by other artists, Renoir, we know that Renoir and Munch were some of the influences. This is one of my favorite paintings. It looks like an abstract painting. It's a painting of a garden in the south of France, I think Nice. And this is the most revolutionary, radical, new at the time. No one painted like that. None of the Impressionists painted like that. And this is one example of why a lot of people consider her the most impressionist of the Impressionists. She also incorporated a lot of earth tones to the palette. The Impressionists were not really keen to paint browns, but she did embrace browns and ochres a lot. So that's pretty recognizable in her work. The white, the use of white and the use of browns. And speaking of browns, one of my most favorite paintings of her, that it's not super popular, I think, it's I just got caught, her head is a little bit caught, but it's this painting of a woman. This is a dining room, But look at these amazing compositions for starters. The figure, it's not center, it's off center, and it's not facing us. We just see her back. There's a still life, but it's at the bottom left corner, and it's cropped. You don't see everything. So everything it's arranged in a triangular way and in a sort of like cropped way. You don't see it in this image, but she's reaching up to a shelf, so you can see the back of her hand. So compositionally, if this is not revolutionary, I don't know what is, because this is not your typical pretty painting compositionally. And let's add the layer of color, the grays, the earth notes, the tarnished yellow on the fireplace, the burnt sienna at the bottom, this charcoal, dusty, burnt tones are incredible. That's the second layer. And now let's talk about the brushwork style. Everything is shredded, whipped. It feels like a cotton candy, kind of like cloud, where it's formed, but it's formed with shreds of sugar. So everything's painted like that. No hard edges whatsoever. The more she developed her own work, the less you could see hard edges on it. For example, on this portrait also of Julie when she was younger, no hard edges, ethereal transparency on certain areas, masterful use of white with some blue on it, and then earth tones on the hair. Compositionally, it's brilliant. This is another example of incorporating a portrait and a view, since she couldn't be outside because she was harassed. And then I think what I'm going to do, I just want to give you a couple of notes about her life that are important. Not everyone was an asshole to her, meaning like man. She married a wonderful individual. Again, he was a painter also, Monet's brother. And in fact, and this is important to point out, he gave up his painting career to support her, which was also something unheard of. Just to let you know, her sister was an extraordinary painter, and then the minute she got married and had a baby, she quit painting. So there was some sort of like precedent in the family that was going to happen eventually. She did want to have a family. She did want to marry. She did want to have babies or have children, have children. But she did not want to give up painting. And she found this wonderful man that supported her, gave up his practice. He is the one who made sure that all her shows were immaculate. Because of the limitations of being a woman at the time, she couldn't go to a gallery and hang her paintings. She couldn't go to a gallery and tell, I want this painting this high or this low. I want it next to this other painting. She couldn't do that. So her husband was in charge of all those important decisions, and yeah, we wanted to point that out. So some jerks, aka art critics at the time, they had an issue with her painting style. They thought that she had potential because of her revolutionary approach to painting. I'm going to bring this one again. This is a portrait of Julie. I don't know if you can see the chair, but that chair is magnificent. And she uses black in this painting, which was a color that was forbidden on the palette of the Impressionists. So she was very independent in her thinking, in her style, in what she wanted to paint and how she wanted to paint it. She was part of the League of Impressionists, but don't think that she was, okay, I'm just going to follow everyone's rules. She did use black. So some critics had an issue because they said she has potential, but she never finishes her work. They also had an issue of her being so radical. And some of them, they consider this the radical brushstroke like a hysterical expression of her biology. So you guys, yes, some art critics, they did not give her credit for her style. They said that she painted this way because she was a woman. So they associated her style of painting to her gender, and they thought that the fact that she didn't finish her paintings, or she was very crazy and hysterical with her brushstrokes, must have been something that was genetic, and that made her sort of like not part of the greats. It was not everyone. Obviously, she had her supporters, and some of them were the big figures in Impressionism. But that's the kind of criticism that she faced. So, again, piling on all the odds against her. Yes, she was privileged. Yes, she was bourgeoisie and part of the well-off circle of social circle. Yes, she was born in Paris. Yes, and all these things that, she had connections. But she had so many things against her. So the final thing, it's not really an odd, because that's the way she died. It was very dramatic, not dramatic, but her life was cut short. She was 54. Julie, her daughter, caught pneumonia, and she nursed her daughter. She caught pneumonia as well, and she died from it. And some painters went on to mature with their work and create iconic pieces. Her life was cut short, and not only it was cut short, but as I said, they just tried to remove her identity from her death certificate, and omitting the fact that she was a painter, but they didn't put painter on her profession. And let's just go back to the premise. What are we going to do this week? I could just go on and on, because again, I feel very inspired, not only about her style, but inspired about all the odds she had to overcome. These are photos of her. Photography was developed at the time, or in its infancy, but a lot of upper class people had access to that medium, and she was upper class, so she did. This is like a typical photo, but my favorite photo of her is this one. Provocative in the sense of teasing the viewer. White hair. She didn't give a crap about anything. So look at the conforming Berthe Morisot, and don't give any F's. So just take a picture. This was the true genius right here, and obviously age and probably all the difficulties that she had to face in the end just gave her the strength to create amazing work. So let's go back to Summer Day. This painting, it's I forgot where it is, but we'll talk about that during the webinar. We want to honor Summer, the last days of summer, her work, the odds that she had to put up, the fact that she was buried by history in the 20th century mostly. But also, we love the fact that the gaze of her models was not a happy gaze. So repeatedly, all the female protagonists of the paintings, there is a tinge of melancholy, depression, and anxiety. So we truly empathize with those feelings, because in 2020, the sense of like isolation, not being able to go to clubs or bars, there's a certain parallel between those experiences. I'm not saying it was the same, obviously, and what we're currently living right now. We can't paint outside. It's not house arrest, but we're basically living indoors mostly. So we have a limited source of subject matter, even though we have internet and we see images and we have a lot of sources, but there's a sense of having or being familiar or empathize with that position. But what we are going to ask you to do is to look at the central figure of this image. We're going to take this as an inspiration, and what we're going to do is we're going to reenact the same posture, the same gaze, the same posture as the figure. So this will be the assignment. I said reenact, I didn't say replicate. So it's not about getting the same hat and getting the same gloves and the same or similar dress. But I do feel like to capture the essence of the last days of summer, we could do a contemporary version of this painting by reenacting that same posture. A sitting posture, hands on the lap, perhaps holding something, perhaps not, perhaps wearing a hat, perhaps not. Doesn't matter what the background is, and that's going to be, it could be you or it could be someone else. It doesn't matter the gender, the sex, the gender, the sex, the gender, the age, and I'm gonna put an example as a final image. I'm gonna put an example of a painting that Kian took of me this morning. So I will use this as the subject of my painting. This morning on the front yard, I reenacted the same posture, or tried to, as the model in Berthe Morisot's painting Summer Day. And that's going to be our subject for the session. Sign up online. We're going to send a link to our community, but also we're going to put it on our website. It is not on our website, but you can still sign up. If you just go to our calendar, there's a link that you can save your spot. We're really thrilled. I'm just going to give a shout out to Jen, our happiness hero, because when we do a webinar, we work together, and she provides all the historical references and all the content that we need as we go about talking about her. So this is the inspirational video, but don't think that we stop here, even though it's like 40 minutes long. So Jen helped us with doing more research as we paint, and exploring more facts, and contextualizing things, finding out technical answers to questions that come up. So there's so much more than that. So for that alone, you should join us, even if you don't paint. But hopefully you will join us and reenact the last days of summer using Berthe Morisot's painting as subject, as an inspiration, for your own sad posture. And that's all. This was good. Do you have any questions? Just send them to us, and we'll answer them. All right. Bye.